All right, folks, we are here. We got folks from all over, which is really, really great. Chicago, Virginia, Woodland Hills, California, Austin, Texas, Seattle, Washington, Michigan, Maryland, South Carolina, San Diego. So many folks coming on right now and sharing where you're from. Too much for me to review right now. What I'd like to do to start us off, and those of you who are a part of the resilience community are accustomed to this. If this is your first time being with us, welcome. We always start off with a very brief centering meditation just to get us in the space of being able to um, be here, be present, and be receptive to whatever it is we're learning today. And as I said, we have a very special guest today, so I'd love to take us through that. Let me just get my meditation bell here. I just want to invite you to sit in a comfortable position, and I do invite you to close your eyes. You don't have to close your eyes if you don't want to. And when you hear the sound of the bell, just start by bringing your awareness to your breath and then waiting for further instructions. We'll just do this for about 90 seconds. Breathing in and breathing out. Take a moment and just notice where it's easiest to sense your breath. Wherever it's easiest, just let your awareness rest right there. The belly, the chest, the nostrils. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. And I just want to invite you to set an intention to be open, to receive, and to integrate any of the information, the wisdom, the stories that you hear today into your life to make it most applicable to you. In a moment, I'll ring the bell, and when I do, I just invite you to listen to the sound of the bell until you can't hear it any longer or until it's no longer there. And then when you feel comfortable, if your eyes were closed, you can slowly open them, expanding your awareness outside of the formal exercise, doing whatever you need to do to transition, stretch, drink some coffee, water, tea. All right, folks. I am extremely excited to introduce you to my dear friend and colleague, Chris Darby. I'm going to pull him on here in just a second. Um, the quick logistical thing that I want to review is that we'll go for a little less than an hour. We're going to get everyone out of here at 10:30 West Coast time. Me and Chris, I'll be interviewing Chris for probably about 40-ish minutes, and we'll save about 10 minutes or so for Q&A at the end. For Q&A, when we get to that point, just save your questions and then you can put that in the chat and we will answer that for you. I'll ask that to Chris live and he'll be able to answer it for you live. And This will be recorded and we will make an announcement at the end as well. But in order to get this recording, all you need to do is sign up for our free resilience community, and we'll give you information for that at the end. And if you're already a member, well, like a lot of you are, of our free resilience community for helping professionals, it will be in your dashboard early next week. So let me pull Chris on to the spotlight. There we go. Everybody should be seeing me and my good friend Chris. I am going to just pull up his bio. I'm going to introduce him, and bear with me. This is one of my growth points, is reading out loud. So I am going to introduce him formally. Chris Darby is a learner and educator who is passionate about supporting people to increase their capacity to communicate, cooperate, and lead across difference. Chris has worked in many different corners of the education field, supporting learners ranging from September kindergartners to Fortune 500 executives. His practice is informed by compassionate curiosity, a growth model of learning, and a belief that positioning informs strategy. Chris studied the African diaspora and colonial Americas at Columbia University as an undergraduate, and he earned his education master's at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where he studied community engagement, peace education, and curriculum development. Currently, Chris is the director of Not Much But Good, NMBG for short, a small arts and education think tank based in Oakland, California. He also organizes with the Brotherhood of Elders Network around educational equity for Black students in Oakland, and recently released Prep and Practice, an online introduction and companion to organizational equity work. Everybody, welcome Chris Darby. Chris, welcome. It's so good to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me, Sam, and good morning, good afternoon to folks. Hope y'all are doing well.
Absolutely. All right, so we're just gonna hop right in, folks, just because time is of the essence. So, Chris, tell us a little bit about your journey, your passion for supporting people to increase their capacity to communicate and lead across difference.
Yeah, light intro question, but I think a lot of that bridging work is how I think of that when we're working with folks across difference, and really comes from how I grew up. I grew up Black, middle class in Berkeley, California. And while that endowed me with the ability to, navigate a lot of different spaces with different racial and socioeconomic compositions, I never felt all the way at home in any single one of them. And so really early on, that brought up questions of belonging and race and class and solidarity. And that bridging, that connecting with folks across difference, was a early navigational strategy that I realized, you know, it not only was necessary for me, but it's opened so many worlds, and so many possibilities. And seeing, I think, where we are macro, that capacity, that ability to connect with folks across difference. And I think it's pertinent to our conversation today. It could be a difference of age, and whatever that may be, is, I think, key to our species getting through this next round of evolution. So I think it's important work.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, for those of you who, have been coming to our calls and accustomed to kind of like our core philosophy at CAS, authentic relationships really is the core nucleus of what we're doing. It all comes back to that, whether it's substance use treatment or therapy or teaching mindfulness or trauma-informed care. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring Chris on and asked him to bless us with his presence is because, I know you have a lot of experience in building relationships with not just young people, but people, as mentioned, growing up in Berkeley. And I was just curious, like, thinking to, your educator experiences, your organizational development experiences, what's kind of like your approach when you think about how how to build authentic relationships with people of diverse backgrounds. Like what comes up for you in terms of, the different nuts and bolts of how you think about doing that, or, just your experiences with that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that there are many tactics and approaches and maneuvers that we can employ in building relationship. But I think on the most basic level, it's working to connect with the full human that you're interacting with. And I think that sometimes that can be particularly challenging when we're thinking of youth. We in our society, we often structurally disempower youth. So even when we set out with the best of intentions, we can feel like the adults are the decision makers and the youth are the things to be managed. And when we get in that mode, and I would suggest that when we're sped up, it's easier to default to that type of thinking, and we know how busy we can get. So when we're going on autopilot, I think it's easy to lose sight that we're interacting with a full human who has interests, motivations, background, story, family influences, all these things that make them who they are. And sometimes structurally that's hard to access. Sometimes we're working in scenarios that really don't set us up to build authentic relationships. So I know, today we'll be talking a lot about the interpersonal and some of the intrapersonal, but I think it's also important for us to attend to the structural, right?
Hmm.
If we are only in a different setting given 10 minutes to interact with the youth, or we have all these items. I'm thinking of folks in school settings. If we have to be worried about a standardized test and preparing a youth for something like that, we might not be able to connect in the ways that we want to. um, but all that to say, I do think trying to hold that core of humanity, and recognizing that whoever we're interfacing with, whether they're a youth or an adult, is navigating and transforming their world in the ways that they they would like to see, and trying to tap into what they're going for, what their motivations are, and where there's mutuality, where there's overlap there. Because if we can get to a place of reciprocity, a place of shared vision, it makes that relationship so much easier.
Right, right, absolutely. Now, I can really appreciate your comment on both the kind of the humanity and the structural context. One of the things I get asked about a lot at conferences when I'm training like large groups of people is a therapist will come up and say something like, I am a crisis counselor, or the nature of my job is such that I get like an hour with a kid and I might not see them again. How do I build an authentic relationship just like in one shot? And I always say, well, I don't know if you can. Like that is, oftentimes I'm speaking about building relationships over time because that's how relationships organically develop. And so I can really appreciate that piece that, there are some circumstances where it's very difficult and it can feel really forced to try and like bring in some of those quote unquote tactics. And then yeah, just the other main thing I heard from you is that humanity piece is so huge. It's like that's the base level. I'm curious for you, like if we were to unpack that a little bit. I know in some of our other conversations we talked about things that really come out of that, like active listening, empathy, really basic relational skills that probably everybody on the call knows about and utilizes. But talk to us, if you can, a little bit about those skills and some other skills that you think about that help build that relationship across difference.
Definitely. Deep listening and empathy, I think, are huge tools. As you know, I think humbly believe that empathy is one of our comparative advantages as a species. I mean, we don't run too fast, we don't see too well in the dark, but we connect with each other, and we support each other, and we have the ability to share empathic concern. and try to understand what each other are feeling and act accordingly. So that is a big building block, I think, for any authentic relationships. And listening, deep listening can be a window into that. I mean, I think we can all think of a time where we felt listened to or we felt ignored, and the difference of that interpersonal experience. And so what that does for a connection, and kind of beyond the information transfer, and then you get to the information transfer part. If I'm actually tuning in and listening, not just to the words that come out of your mouth, but the tone, the
Mm,
emotional tenor, and starting again to think about some of the motivations and tapping into that empathy. And there's just a whole lot that we can pick up. And that information really informed how we can move. Um, and in I would say, in addition to empathy and deep listening, there are things like trust. And I think I want to go back to that structural piece again. And because sometimes, again, we are in a space where, hey, we only have an hour, this is the only time we're gonna interface with this youth. And having some honesty around that, right? What wouldn't you say there? I'll be here forever. Anytime you need me, what is that going to do to a relationship if you
right,
know this is only going to be 1 hour, right?
right,
And you might not be able to explain the whole clinical approach that has you only here for an hour. But some level of honesty and transparency when it's appropriate there, I think can be, including around our limitations. I think
right,
that if folks are over promising, that's one side of it. But if we can be honest about where we are limited, I think that it may not be super satisfying,
right.
but it is a better building block of trust than over promising.
Right, right. Yeah, one thing that comes up for me as you're saying that is like I often find myself telling folks an authentic relationship doesn't always mean, I'm super buddy buddy with a young person. It's not always like, oh, Sam, I love Sam, right? What it really means, I mean, it could be that, and it's great when it's that, and I love
Right.
that. But what it really means is there is predictability in the relationship, there's emotional safety in the relationship. And if the context is what it is, as you're saying, it's very important, as you're saying, not to overpromise, right? And to just be present to what that is. That's how you start authenticity. And that, even if it's not you, the individual provider or parent or educator who is continuing to grow that relationship, at least you're planting that seed intentionally from an authentic standpoint.
Right.
um I was just curious, does anything come to mind in terms of like experiences with you and your personal professional experience of working with young people from diverse backgrounds, and anything you want to share about, those experiences with deep listening, empathy, or, anything we just talked about?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that excuse me, came to mind as you were talking. My first gig in education. I was I think a junior at Berkeley High. I was 16, and I started working with an organization out of Oakland called the Mosaic Project, which works with fourth and fifth graders around what at the time we were calling diversity education, nonviolent conflict resolution, what I thought of as a teenager as kind of being cool with yourself and being cool with others. How do we again navigate across difference? And one of the really interesting facets of that program, it was a outdoor education model. So we took 3 classrooms of kids, and always with a different racial and socioeconomic mix. So we might have a private school class, we may have a public school class from Oakland, and then a parochial school from East Palo Alto or something like that. So all coming together, mix them up in cabins. And what was interesting about that was, because this was a new space for all the students, we were in a beautiful site out in the redwoods in the hills of Napa. um, there was always this deep orienting process of kids kind of figuring out, A, where am I, and B, who are these other people, and whether it be peers, their age, or these adults who are talking about nonviolent conflict resolution. It was just a very different context than their regular classroom, I think, for all the kids. And what that meant is there was this period of figuring out who am I in this space? What are the norms? What are the rules? And where are the walls? And one year I was the quote unquote chill out dude, which was the disciplinarian, so to speak, which was an awesome gig because really all of the work I was doing was backed up by our curriculum of how we're relating with ourselves and relating with each other. So what that really looked like, if a kid was having a hard time, we'd chat under the redwoods, and usually it was a pretty productive thing. But that process of, again, figuring out who I am in this space and understanding where the walls are, I learned that, to your point, if we don't come with some predictability as adults, as stewards of this space, that orienting response can just go off the rails quick. And I don't know what, as a youth, I don't know what safety is, because I don't understand where I am and what the expectations are. And so that may look like me getting really big and aggressive because I feel unsafe and I'm going to try to create and hold space. And that might look like me getting really small and withdrawing and being worried about what might happen if I put a foot wrong. So anyway, just to really underline what you were saying about what creates safety. And I don't think I've ever had a youth come to me and say, Chris, can you give me some rules and some guidelines? I just but there is a desire for that internally, because again, if it's just open field, and they don't know where the walls are, that can be really, really scary.
Right.
And thinking about the deep listening and empathy, there's a story that comes from that time. Same role. When I was the chill out dude, there was a kid who came to us, and he was dealing with a handful of things at school and at home. And so his teacher had given us a heads up when they were coming up. And day one, like, was running into some trouble in his group. Nothing terrible, wasn't lashing out at other kids or anything like that. But just kind of wandering off, not engaging. And so I was brought in to have a chat with him as well as the executive director. So the three of us sat down, and we're asking him how his experience is going, what's working, what's not. And in the middle of it, he kind of says, "Hey, can I go to the bathroom?" And we're like, "Yeah, of course. There's the bathroom right there. It's a shared bathroom. All the kids use it." And he looks over there. He says, "Oh, no, I don't have to go to the bathroom." And so me and the ED kind of look at each other and say, "Well, there's a private bathroom in the nurse's office there. It's got a door you can close. It's a little bit cleaner if you want to use it." And he said, "Oh, yeah, I'd like to use that." So we walk him over there. He's in there 15 minutes or so. It was a little while. And he comes out chipper, straight up chipper. Just, "Hey, how's it going?" We finished the conversation, but he wants to get back to his group at this point. He's like, okay, yeah, it'll we'll do better. Yep, I can agree to all that. Great. Da, da, da. And gets back to his group. Didn't hear from this kid the rest of the time. He was having a blast. I went and checked on him once in his group, but couldn't even get a word in edgewise because he was so engaged. And I think that's a simple story. But there was just that one moment of listening where we were tuning in to what this kid was saying. And then the empathy part kicks in. I know what it is to be camping with a bathroom I don't want to use, and when I'm holding that in, and what that does for my mood and how I show up. So there's probably not a huge body of work around letting kids poop when they need to in the ways they need to, but something so human that we had a little window into just because we were listening in that one moment, and how that can transform an experience for that individual youth, for his group leader, and how they were able to show up with the rest of the students. So small moments like that can have really big impacts.
Right, right. Yeah, because I would think that the inverse of that is you could have been, here's the bathroom, and he's like, I don't want to use the bathroom. And then either A, you just say okay, or B, there's some flex from the adult that's like, no, this is where the bathroom is. And now it's not just like a receding and an effacing, but there is an impasse that occurs with that person. And now they go from, you know, the chipper young kid who came out of the bathroom to emotionally unsafe and physically uncomfortable. And it's really a testament to that, just like you said, tuning in those moments and kind of expanding that awareness so that you could be present to that young person, which is really great.
Yeah, and that something you mentioned in there, I think that's a good to underline, is the positional power. Like, how
Mm,
are we using that positional power as
yeah,
adults in that situation? Because to your point, and I'm thinking of language from some adolescents I work with in West Oakland, we could have just smashed on that kid. No, that's
right,
the bathroom. That,
right,
that is for you to use. He probably would have shut down, dug his heels in. Now we're in this power struggle, but instead we used our positional power to allow this kid to use a bathroom that students weren't usually allowed to use, right? So,
right,
like, maybe there's a larger facilities concern here.
right.
And I think in that moment, how are we using that positional power, which is, always characterizes our relationships with anyone, right?
Right,
But
right.
definitely with youth, I think there's often a really big power imbalance there.
For sure. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to positional power within the context of like, I'm a therapist. There's a lot of therapists, there's a lot of educators, there's a lot of mentors on the call. Positional power when it comes to race, gender, sexuality, particularly like when you're also in this professional role that where there is loads of layers of power. I'm just curious if you could unpack that a little bit and what we as providers or people, might be thinking of to give ourselves more awareness so that we can have that sensitivity and still tune in those moments like you described with that young person.
Yeah, that is a rich area of exploration right there. I mean, where my mind goes is to something we talk about in prep and practice, which is social location,
Hmm.
which is basically this idea of how we are situated in the larger social landscape, and that can include our race, our gender, our sexuality, our educational background, et cetera, including our role in an organizational setting, or positional power vis-a-vis a kid. And I think, as you mentioned in my bio off top, I'm a firm believer that positioning informs strategy.
Mm,
And so, there may be certain levers of change, certain windows of connection that are available to me, because of my background, demographics, experience, that may not be open to you, and vice versa, right? And so I think taking the time to do the intrapersonal work, that inner work, to understand as best we can, where we are situated in that landscape. And sometimes for the writers in the group, I think of it as seeing ourselves from a third person perspective, as opposed to only seeing our story from a first person perspective. Um,
mm,
because I think when we're understanding, or trying to understand, it's an endless practice, but trying to better understand where we are located, and where whoever we're interfacing with is located, including that positional power that you mentioned, it's gonna inform us. It's going to provide some possibility, some level of possibility that might be direct connection. Hey, I know we share an interest or a background or an experience, and that's something that we can connect around. It can be a watch out. I know that I don't have deep insight into someone else's experience, who's coming from a different background or what have you. And that may cue me to approach things a little bit differently. So it's not a one-to-one or deterministic in terms of, oh, if you have these backgrounds or experiences, then therefore you should move in this way. But I think that cultivating that awareness as a practice can be really huge in how we show up, and how we are received too. Because I think that's another piece of it. Some of these backgrounds and experiences you might be able to just see looking at me or when I talk, and then there's a whole lot of stuff that we're not able to ascertain immediately. But that doesn't mean I don't have a phenotype. That doesn't
Right.
mean I
Right.
don't walk through the world and people see me and react in certain ways. And for my background, and I'm thinking in the Black freedom movement, I'm thinking of W.E.B. Du Bois and the double consciousness, that ability to not only see yourself again from your own perspective, but see how others might see you,
Mm.
and how that informs how you might move.
Hmm. Double consciousness, I like that term. And also, of course, social location, something you presenced as well, having the double consciousness of how am I showing up and how might it look to others in the way I look and how I show up and how I land with others. I mean, it sounds like obviously a major ingredient in how to be with people of different backgrounds and not take up too much space maybe and position them to share their experience. At least I'm thinking about in the context of, if I'm a therapist or an educator or a mentor or something like that. um there was something that caught my eye in your prep and practice modules, which I was hoping you could speak to a little bit. I think your first lesson is about self-love, and that, or it's one of your early lessons at least.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
that really caught my eye because, also in your biography we were talking about, or in your intro we were talking about, compassionate curiosity, compassion, self-love, self-compassion. I'm just curious if you could, I'd love for you to speak to the role of self-love and compassion in this work and building relationships with people of different backgrounds, and just how you show up in this world, because it really caught my eye, and I think it's a very, very deep, powerful practice.
yeah. I appreciate you pointing that out. And I think I want to back up a little bit and say, prep and practice is really flows from my work doing organizational equity
Hmm.
consulting. So this is working with a lot of adults, which is it's a little bit of a switch up for me. And you can't say it to the adults, but the continuity from the equity work in the fourth and fifth graders to the CEOs it ain't that different. There's a lot of continuity, but
Right.
dressed up differently for sure. But what I was finding in my work is that folks were coming into these conversations around equity, and most of my focus is racial equity, but just charged, holding on to a lot of shame and blame and anger, and all these things are all valid in the space. I'm not saying that these things shouldn't exist, but what that does for our coming together, and what we can move together, and it can really hinder our ability to see each other, hear each other, collaborate, etc. And so I was thinking, if I could wave my little magic wand and folks were infused with some things as they were coming into that space, what would those things be? And so the prep part of the prep and practice is really getting ourselves in the right space to be able to engage in conversations, and collaboration across difference. And so the things that we distilled were self-love, compassionate curiosity, body awareness, and
Mm.
imagination.
Mm.
Those are the ingredients, I think, if we come into these conversations and these relationships with, that'll give us a little bounce to really navigate and work to transform the dynamics that we're looking at. So um getting back to this idea of self-love, why that was so important, again, I found a lot of folks coming in really scarce
Hmm.
and feeling like they need to be someone else in order to be constructive and productive in this space. And I think when we start from that point and we're trying to reach outside of ourselves from jump, one, we're not tapped in to all the things that
Hmm.
make us who we are, our goodness, our worthiness, our insight, our knowledge, our expertise on our own experience. And so what we're able to give to the collective, to give in a relationship with a youth or otherwise, is really limited, if we're not tuned in. And we're also much more prone to be working from places of fear and insecurity. And whether that, again, thinking about the deep listening, whether that comes out of our mouth or not, the kids are vibing off of that. Anyone
Right.
in a relationship
Right.
is feeling that and picking that up. And back to that sense of safety and that we talked about earlier, kind of knowing where the walls are. Um, if I'm entering a relationship feeling insecure and I'm trying to project something that maybe I'm not, um, that inauthenticity, the person we're interfacing with might not know exactly where the real thing is. Like, I don't know if they're being inauthentic with just me or they're being inauthentic with themselves and they don't, but whatever combination there, it doesn't feel like this is a person I can rely on, because I see that they're, again, reaching far outside of themselves. And there's a place for stretching. I'm not saying we
Right.
have to just play in the pocket all the
Right.
time. um but I think if we're grounded in that
Right.
self-love and just our inherent worthiness,
Hmm.
um, that's an energy that infuses our interactions and our
Right.
relationships with other folks and really sets a strong foundation.
Right. It's almost like it sounds like what you're saying. It's almost like that meta communication or the subtext is like if I come in with that authentic energy of self love, it's like I want to know that I want to project that out so that I want to make it safe for them to feel that way about themselves too. At least that's how I think about it from a psychotherapist standpoint. I'm kind of sending that subtext out so that as a way to model it. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think that's huge. It not only does it ground us in who we are and the gifts we have to give, but it's definitely an invitation to
Yeah.
others to
Right.
be themselves and bring forth those gifts as well.
Right. So you said those four things you listed. I just want to say them out loud one more time. You said uh, self love, compassionate curiosity, body awareness, and imagination.
That's right.
So obviously, we'll have to have you back on for another interview because I feel like we could spend a whole hour talking about each of those things.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to say that out loud because I like that. I mean, that's a conceptual map of like the work that I can do on myself interpersonally to bring to those interpersonal situations and those contexts to build those authentic relationships along with some of the other things we've been talking about, right?
Mhm.
Like I love deep listening as it's a very, like, I think about it as a very pragmatic tool, but it's also an underlying concept and approach and philosophy of how we approach others. And of course, as you mentioned earlier, empathy hopefully may be the thing that helps us get to the next evolutionary step as a species, but to be determined, I guess. So we probably got time for maybe one more question from me, and then we'll open it up for Q&A just because I want to respect everyone's time. I think let's end with, you know, we have a lot of people on the call who do this work with young people, who work with people of different backgrounds. Do you have any thoughts on like how to stay kind of abreast of methods, of strategies, of ways of thinking when it comes to working with folks of different backgrounds? Like what are the practices that we should be thinking about, that we should have in our awareness ongoing? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there are a couple different ways I'm thinking about this. Uh, and let me go with this one. I would underline community.
Yeah.
I think that when we are working in community, um, and I'm thinking of our colleagues or fellow practitioners, but I'm also thinking about the youth we're working with. Um, we get this is where diversity is operationalized, right?
Hmm.
I'm from my social location, from my set of backgrounds, I have my lenses, and that's great. Again, I want to bring that forth, but it's also limited.
Right.
It's also bounded, right? But if I am working in community, um, especially a diverse community where folks have different perspective, different lenses, and we're working in a community of practice, um, then I'm able to get feedback, and I'm able to ask questions of folks, where I think our ability to stray into practices that are not supporting authentic relationships with adolescents, I think those are more likely if I'm doing my lone wolf thing,
Hmm.
and I'm only tapped into my experience and where I'm coming from, and I think again a community like this, for instance, where we're able to come together and discuss things pertinent to our approaches and how we go about things, and then that other piece of the community is the youth again, like what responses are we getting from them, and what is the interaction there, because I think that sometimes, and you didn't quite ask this question, but I want to speak to it. There's when we're working with adolescents in particular, there's this like pull to be the most hip and be up on the
Hmm.
latest thing, and so therefore I can relate to this youth, and there are some places for that. I'm a sports fan, for instance, right? I probably will know what's going on with the Warriors when they're playing. And if I'm working with the youth in the Bay Area, there's a decent chance that may be a point of connection. But one that is still kind of endemic to who I am. I actually do care. That's not me just doing some online research before going and talking to somebody.
Right.
Um, but even there, sometimes I think we can over rely on what feels like, I don't want to say it's a cheap trick, but it something that is a little bit superficial, right?
Yeah.
And so again, I think if that is authentic to us, I think that's fine to bring into the relationship. But as we were talking about earlier, really staying connected to who you are and how that shows, and that authenticity, I think that can go a long way, because I don't know about timeless, but there are some things like care and empathy and compassion that even if I'm not familiar with the latest craze that the adolescents are really into, and they can feel that, and this may be some ego too, because what am I worried about? I'm worried about looking old or corny or something like that, and that may be fine. To your point, like the kid may not be like, wow, Chris is the coolest person I've ever met, but they can count on me for being that corny caring dude.
Right.
Hey, corny and caring over inauthentic any day of the week,
Yes.
you know?
Absolutely. so that connecting to that humanity, it's like you bring it with you when you practice that authenticity.
Mm.
And I've had a lot of experiences with that. And then the other thing you said too was community. And thank you for taking my slightly vague question in the right direction. This is my first ever interview, so it's a little bit harder than I expected, but I'm really enjoying this conversation. um, the community piece, there's a lot of research behind that too. I mean, one of the things that I often find myself telling people is like, if you want to shift or add a habit or behavior, get with people who do that as their norm. You know, if you want to be a meditator, go join a group of a meditation group where people just do that as their norm. If you want to get fit, join a gym, right? And so with people, not just a gym where you're a lone wolf, but like with
That's
your
right.
people, right? And
Hmm.
it sounds like what you're saying is it's the same thing. It's like have groups, have quorums of folks who come together and read and talk and conversate, where this is the thing where you're kind of what I like to call at the Center for Adolescent Studies, that spiral learning and spiral awareness, where it's like you just keep coming back to it and get deeper into it over and over and over again. And that, your community is your mirror. It helps you grow. So I think that's a really powerful, bit of advice for folks. This has been great. Let's open it up to some folks for Q&A. So, I apologize. We don't have the Q&A function here with this Zoom meeting, folks. It's usually optional in the webinars, but not in this meeting. So do me a favor. If you have a question for Chris, go ahead and put it in the chat. I'm going to do my best to go through and find it, just because sometimes, as you all know, the chat moves fast. And I'm just going to scroll to the bottom. And it looks like we have a question here, actually. So let me just try and find this before it keeps shifting. In the work you're doing, what have moments of challenge looked like for you? What helped you get through those challenging experiences? Excellent question.
Yeah. Yeah. Challenge has looked like all sorts of things over the years. I think in the context of this conversation about authentic relationships with adolescents, I think something we talked about at the top, the structural piece that has been a consistent set of challenges for me throughout my work. I think that and I'm kind of speaking in broad strokes, but as a Western society, I don't know, the bounds we put on relationships and the ways that we come into contact with adolescents, and a lot of my background, again, in education, is around the structures of schooling and how I'm pushing into schools or pulling out of schools. Or one year I worked as a teacher's assistant for second and third graders, so it was like in a school every day of the week. But other than that, I've really danced around them, because they are, I think, overwhelmingly a part of a colonial project, and oftentimes the socialization that's occurring in them is not great for the kids. It may be great for workforce development or something like that. You hear language like cradle to career. I'm like, cradle to career, wait a second, what is that all that's out here for our youth, is a career? And not to downplay the importance of and the financial lifeline that a career can bring, but some of those structures bring a lot of challenges just in how we can show up. Are we expecting the folks to be sitting in a seat facing forward, or are we able to be moving our bodies outdoors, simple things like that. So I think I've run up against a lot of structural challenges in that
Mm.
way, and that can really, I think, flow down into the interpersonal. The example you gave earlier, Sam, if I only have an hour with a student, what is possible, and the challenges that are inherent in that. But I guess another stripe more on the interpersonal side of that is, when we make mistakes, or when there's a misstep, or there is a rupture in the relationship with youth. I think I'm in shared company here to say, we care a whole awful lot, and we put a lot into our work and into building these relationships. So when something doesn't go well, or when something feels off, and when again we've made a misstep, we can be really, really hard on ourselves. And I think that one tuning into, some maladaptive things, perfectionism and blamelessness, feeling like we always have to be right, and then how sometimes we can use our positional power to kind of compound that. If we make a mistake, don't want to admit it because we're supposed to be perfect or blameless, and the youth are picking up on the mistake, but we double down on it and we get defensive around it, and then what is that going to do to a relationship, right? And I think the flip side of that is what an opportunity for deepening relationship is when we make a mistake or there is some sort of disjuncture. Here's an opportunity for us to be honest, for us to show vulnerability, and for us to show accountability, model accountability. And so these are ways that in any relationship we can really deepen, and in particularly with youth. So I talk about corny. It sounds a little bit corny to say like, hey, every mistake is an opportunity for deepening it, but oftentimes it is.
Right.
Oftentimes it is, if we can approach it like that, and breathe through some of our own pride and ego in the process.
For sure. Absolutely. We have a few more questions here, folks. We're probably not going to have time to get to all of them. I'm just going to pick one for Chris that I know he'll have some good things to say about. And then what we'll do is our team will get the rest of the questions that we didn't ask. And then I'll get with Chris on another time, and maybe we'll send out some thoughts on the rest of them that we couldn't get to today. But one that's here that I think would be good is Nick is asking, are there any additional readings you can suggest in addition to what we've discussed today? Any books or articles or things that come to mind for people who want to learn more about this type of topic?
Short answer, yes. Oh, yeah, I mean, I think one of the issues I'm running into right now in thinking about how to answer this question is I feel like I'm such a generalist, and so the things I pull from aren't necessarily directly applicable, but there's so much overlap. One that's popping to mind right now is Resma Menakem's work around somatics and trauma. My grandmother's hands is one that I really appreciate, and I think in terms of social location, I think he gets into some really deep conversations around explorations around who we are and why we show up the way we do. And so thanks Sam for popping that into the chat.
Absolutely.
I think that is a deep dive into again who we are and why, and some of the reasons we might show up in the ways we do in relationship. And he has a racialized lens, which is dear to me. So that's one I really dig. I want to kind of take the liberty to think about this a little bit,
absolutely.
and get you a list that you can send out, Sam.
Sure, absolutely.
Because I can go through the shelf.
Right.
I guess one that actually I just saw as I turned my head. I'm rereading Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me right now. And again, a little bit heavy on the race side of things, but just such an, I think in terms of empathy, like a window of empathy into the experience of especially Black adolescents and Black male adolescents, and what some of the things that animate that experience. I think he does an excellent job. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the work, it's a letter to his son, who I think was a young adolescent at the time that he wrote it. So he is bearing his soul, really in an attempt to build an authentic relationship with his son, kind of through what some of the tropes of Western parenting might be, of I'm going to protect my kid, and I'm going to shield them from some of these harmful things. And one of his theses in this is basically, you, yeah, at least as a Black person, coming of age here, there is no safety. And so how do we move with that? And what does that mean if there's no absolute safety? There's no place we can go to be absolutely safe. And so I think that is not necessarily universally applicable, but that window into that experience is a really powerful one. So those are the couple that are just sitting on top of my head.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to come with some more as I do a little bit slower thinking.
For sure. I feel a guest blog post in the future coming soon with that. That sounds like an excellent idea. And those are great places to start. Um, Chris, last question. How do people find you? Tell us more about your work. Tell us about your course, Prep and Practice. And I'm going to drop a link for everyone into the chat as you discuss that a little bit.
Right on. Yeah. I'm very project based, so I'm kind of all over the place with NMBG, my think tank. But one place you can find me, Prep and Practice. This is again is a course that I put together over the past year, with support from many friends. And I think after spending a fair amount of time in that equity work, so to speak, it was an opportunity for me to kind of express some of the things that I've been thinking and feeling, and didn't always have time to share in an engagement. And as we talked about earlier, those foundational preparation steps of self-love, compassionate curiosity, body awareness, and imagination. These are things that feel so important to how we work. And so it's been a professional space that's been a place of exploration for me. So I think that's a great place to start, if you're more interested in what I'm up to, because it has been a labor of love. And just being able to dive in and having it's fairly new, just put it out the first version this year. So just getting the first rounds of feedback from folks, how people are using it, how it's been showing up in their work and their approach, has just been a super cool exploration. So that's been really great so far.
Excellent, man. Well, it's been great to have you. I can't tell you how grateful I am for you being here, man. You're a dear friend of mine, and I look forward to more conversations like this. And I hope you'll bless our community again in the future by coming back and chatting more about, the success of Prep and Practice and just the evolution of your work.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thank you, Sam. Thank you all for having me. I've tuned in to a meditation in the past. I know y'all have a really robust and beautiful community, so I appreciate y'all giving me the time to come and hang and chat a little bit.
Absolutely. Again, folks, if you are new to this today, this is a part of the Resilience Community for Helping Professionals. It's a completely free community. We do meditations every Monday morning live. And we do calls like this. This is actually our first interview, but we do kind of professional development training calls once a month, also live, and we record them. If you're already a part of the community, this recording will be in your dashboard early next week. If you're not a part of the community, I'm going to drop this link right here. Just go ahead and sign up for free, and that's how you'll access the recording. There's also a certificate, continuing education for qualified mental health professionals. And yeah, you get to see Chris again. So I hope you guys will check that out. It's been great. I really, really appreciate everyone's time. And hope to see as many of you as possible on that Monday morning meditation this next Monday. And hopefully we can talk Chris into coming back and chatting with us again, folks. Hope you all have a wonderful day, a wonderful weekend, and we will see you soon. Later, folks. Bye.
See y'all.